I'm Brian Cannon, this is Microdot, welcome back. Welcome to the second episode from the Microdot YouTube channel. Today we'll be talking about how we created the artwork for the Oasis single, Some Might Say, which is my favourite of all the Oasis artwork I created. It's Oasis' first #1, and it's the first time both my parents appeared on an Oasis sleeve. I'd like to thank Keith Capstick for lending me this record, because I don't actually have a copy. And also shout out to Andy O'Sullivan, who offered as well, but it wasn't needed. So thanks guys, I've got the record. Today we're coming to you from the Microdot Boutique, the new Microdot Boutique, which we've nicknamed the Microdot Megastore because of its size. For those of you not familiar with the work of Microdot, we created all the record sleeve artwork for Oasis and The Verve in the 90s. We have a physical shop, which is this, and an online presence. I'll drop in the description below links to all our social media and the website. So the timeline for the project goes as follows. The song was actually demoed in London on July the 6th, 94 at Maison Rouge. I have done an interview with Owen Morris, who recorded the record, and I was going to drop some into this video, but having watched it back now, it's 16 minutes long, so it's obviously too long to go into this in its entirety. And it's too good not to play it all, so what I'm going to do is just put that out as a separate video. This project had an unusual timeline insofar as we shot the sleeve before the record was actually recorded, which is very rare. I could never actually do a sleeve without having heard the record. So I hadn't heard the finished version, obviously, because it hadn't been recorded, but I had heard the demo. The demo to the song was actually recorded at the end of the session for whatever, in some downtime. Noel just said, oh, here's a new idea I've got. And that's how the demo for the song came about. We shot the sleeve itself on January the 23rd, 95 at Cromford in Derbyshire, which was before the recording of the actual single, which took place on the weekend of the 24th to 26th of Feb in 95 at Loco Studios in South Wales. Now, this was Tony McCall's last recording with the band, and his last performance with the band was doing the same song on Top of the Pops when it was released. It was released on April the 24th, and he was on Top of the Pops on April the 26th as his last performance with the band. And funnily enough, Alan White's first performance was doing the same song the week after on Top of the Pops. So there can't be many bands did the first #1 single with two different drummers over two performances over a fortnight on Top of the Pops. So the story of the artwork begins on 30th of November 1994 in Southampton. I've actually found recently this diary, my diary from 1994. There's some tales in here, I can tell you that. So if we look at that night, it says here, me and Wayne, that I presume was Wayne Griggs, who was the Verve's DJ at the time. So me and Wayne, we caught the 11:15 train to Southampton, arriving at 4:15. Then we got a taxi to the venue and hung about with the lads being Oasis, of course. Then we went back to the hotel. Now this is interesting, I think. It says the band have aliases. They were just getting to the stage whereby they were famous enough to have to check into hotels under false names so they wouldn't get mithered. And it says here that Bonehead was Reggie Perrin, and Liam was Billy Shears, who's obviously a Beatles character. So after we'd been to the hotel, we went back to the venue in the minibus, and it says, top gig. And then after the gig, we watched in the van the video of the gig. Because at that point, they didn't have a big tour bus. It was literally a minibus that they toured from gig to gig in. And it was in that tour van that Noel Gallagher gave to me a handwritten set of the lyrics for the song Some Might Say. I'll pop them up on screen now. Those are the actual lyrics that he wrote out in front of me that night. So the brief was to illustrate all the lyrics in the song in one image. So as with all Oasis projects, me and Noel would initially have the meeting. I would then go away and brief the photographer, and then I'd come up with concepts about what we were going to do. And the first one we'd normally do is go scouting a location, because obviously that's where everything would sit. So in this case, going off Noel's cue that he wanted all the lyrics illustrated, my starting point was standing at the station, because that's a physical place where I could actually, latch onto that. We have to find a station. And then the next bit was in need of education. So I thought, if you're standing at a station in need of education, how do we illustrate that? And I came up with the idea of a disused station, because if you're at a disused railway station waiting for a train, you need educating to the fact that there ain't no train coming. So that was it. The first starting point before all the other madness that is in the image came along was we need to find a disused railway station that looked attractive. Not as easy as it sounds, actually. What we did do was, during the railway network in this country before the 60s was far bigger than it is now. So we looked at railway maps prior to 1963 and marked off where all the stations were in a given area, and then did the same thing with a map from present day. And where there was an X on one and wasn't on another, we thought, well, there would have been a railway station there at one point. So we went along to all these places, and invariably you just find just like a silhouette of a station, really, not like, you know, just the outline of a platform, nothing that really, it just didn't look right, you know, it's just a bit of an old platform falling to bits. And I don't know who actually suggested it to us in the end, but somebody mentioned that Cromford, whilst it looks, that's the station we shot it at in Derbyshire, whilst it looks disused, half of it is still in use. So if you look at this here, this is the disused half, obviously, and there's a tunnel there with no track going into it. Well, just next to that is another tunnel with a track coming out of it, and over here is a platform that was in use. I'll get to that later, because trains were actually coming through this station as we were doing this. And this brings up a point that I never put a clock on any of this. And what I mean by that is, you know, all the other design agencies, they get given a budget and a brief and away they go, and they say, so if for argument's sake they had a £1,000 budget and they were working at an easy number to work with £50 an hour, they'd allocate 20 hours to a given project. Well, if we did that, we'd have run out of time before we'd even got to the shoot, because we spent days just looking for the place. And that's what separated us from everybody else doing this back in the day, basically, that we just went that extra mile. The money wasn't the issue. I couldn't care less. All I was concerned about was creating that killer image that was going to last for decades to come. And importantly as well, I think, I never asked permission to do shoots in any of these locations. Now, you think that's madness nowadays. You know, you think a band the size of Oasis, they'd have this huge production company that do all the shoot planning, whereby you get in touch with the railway company, I suppose, or the local council, whoever it might be, you know, and you'd have to deal with health and safety people. We didn't do any of that. We just turned up and did it. I mean, like I said earlier, that station's still in use. So every 20 minutes, you'd have a train going from Derby to Matlock, then back, with bemused people staring out the window, seeing my dad pushing a wheelbarrow full of fish. And my thought on that was, if you ask permission and they say no, you know you can't do it there then. But if you just go ahead and do it, and you get stopped halfway through, at least you've got something in the can. So that was the guerrilla way of working we did. So, you know, that was it. We turned up and just did it. I'm not sure who it was, but somebody recommended us that we look at Cromford. So we did, and we did test shots, and we thought it was great, because that was precisely what we were after. It was obviously a railway station that looked like it was disused, but still in use, if you see what I mean. So it was perfect. So we had that, and then it was a case of working out all the rest of the lyrics in the song and coming up with visuals for them. But before I get to that, I suppose everybody always asks me, who are all the people? So going left to right, if that is the far left, on the bridge is Liam Gallagher. I've seen online arguments saying, no, it's not him, is it him? That's Liam Gallagher. And he's wearing a Man City bobble hat, if you look closely, sky blue hat on his head. Then down here, with the watering can, Noel Gallagher. Some people get them confused, but that's the audience. Liam on the bridge, Noel on the platform, which I think is great. You know, they didn't really have to come for this. They're just sort of, we could have easily done it without them, but they were hands-on, and they loved the process, and, you know, it was still dead exciting, and everybody was banging into it at that point. So, yeah, they came along. On the platform itself, on the what is the railway track, because, you know, trains coming just 15 foot past all the way through this. That's Carla Knox, who was the barmaid in my local in Wigan. And she played the role of She's Got Dirty Dishes on the Brain. I'll get back into all the props and what have you in a minute, but just back to the people. The dog, the famous dog. This was a theatrical dog that we hired from an animal agency. And this dog has been in Kevin Costner films. True story, this. And when the guy turned up on the morning with the dog, he brought 2 dogs. Now, these theatrical dogs aren't cheap. And when he gets out of his van with his 2 dogs, I was like, whoa, hang on a minute, we only paid for 1, or we only want 1. And he said, the dog will only perform if its mate is out of shot. Do you see what I mean? So there was another Alsatian down here with the dog handler out of shot to keep this one nice and chilled. So the theatrical dog from Kevin Costner films. Then it's my mum who's mopping the platform. The reference to the kitchen in the song, that's where my mum comes in. Matthew Sankey, who is my assistant at Microdot. You might have seen him credited. I think if you look on the credits for Morning Glory, you'll see a sleeve by me, assisted by Matthew Sankey. And then my dad, playing a blinder here, pushing the wheelbarrow. So I've come up with a concept, we've got the location, I've chosen all the models, we know exactly what we're doing. So off we set to shoot the sleeve. And we went in 2 vehicles, nothing like as glamorous as you would imagine. We had a bog standard tranny van and a Peugeot 205. In the tranny van, there was Mike, the photographer, driving, who picked up Liam and Noel from their mother's house in Burnage, because Liam was still living there at the time. And Matt picked up me, my mum and dad, and Carla, and we set off in his Peugeot 205. So off we went over the hills to Derbyshire, and we checked in the night before the shoot at a hotel in Matlock, Bath. Everybody went to bed apart from me, Liam and Matt, unsurprisingly, and we had a few scoops. So what does it all mean? As I mentioned earlier, Noel instructed me that he wanted the lyrics of the song illustrated. Now, obviously not every lyric in the song has a visual, but you know, you get the gist. So if you look at the lyrics, it starts off, some might say that sunshine follows thunder, go and tell it to the man who cannot shine. So what I had to do was basically break the sleeve down into a series of mini sleeves, each one of which was allocated a character to illustrate bits of the lyrics. So go and tell it to the man who cannot shine. I'll just illustrate this with my phone here. So if you look at that, that's basically the homeless person, the beggar, played by Matt Sankey there. And, well, the idea being, you know, if you're homeless and begging on the streets, that's pretty much, you know, the man who cannot shine. And it says later on in the song, go and tell it to the man who lives in hell. That's the same character, you know, living in hell, begging on the streets and being homeless is pretty much living in hell, I would say. So that's that bit explained. Then it goes on to say, some might say we will find a brighter day. You know, it's very optimistic, very upbeat. It's a very upbeat song, I think. And that was illustrated by the bit where Liam is on the bridge doing the salute, the wave. Because back in the day, both Liam and Richard Ashcroft, independently of each other, kind of developed this sort of Basil Fawlty style character whereby they would have adopt this posh voice, and Liam would be walk around going, hoorah! And Richard would be going, splendid. So that kind of where that comes from. He's on the bridge going, hoorah, doing his salute that goes along with it, which is, you know, we will find a brighter day, the optimism of the whole thing. Then it goes on to say, because I've been standing at the station in need of education. We've already been through that. That was the setting for the whole scene in the first place. You know, the disused railway station bit. If you're standing there waiting for a train, you need educating. The sink is full of fishes. This is where my dad's character comes in. And he's dressed accordingly like a workman, pushing this wheelbarrow full of fish. Now, my dad made this wheelbarrow out of a real sink with his next door neighbour by welding on this wheel. And that leads to another story, because where we shot this is about as far from the sea in the British Isles as you can possibly get. And we just didn't foresee this. Something we didn't consider. So as you can imagine, fishmongers are not 10 a penny in this area. So on the morning of the shoot, we had to drive to Bakewell, which I'm not sure exactly how far it is, but it's quite a drive there and back just to find some fish. So there he is in his flat cap, overalls, turned down wellies, which I've never seen him wearing before or after. I don't know where they came from, with the sink full of fishes. I think that's a genius construction by my dad there. Then it goes on to say, she's got dirty dishes on the brain. The character played by Carla. Again, this was made by my dad and his next door neighbour, and it's an umbrella, but instead of having the canopy over the top to keep the rain off your head, on all the spokes around the brolly itself are pots and pans, the dirty dishes. And if you look closely, there's even a baking tray on there. And they were bolted onto the end of each one of the spokes. There is pots, there's pans, spoons, all sorts going on there. And Noel, above it with the watering can, he's providing the rain, because, where's that in the lyrics here? In need of education in the rain. That's where Noel's character comes in. He's got the watering can, which was full of water, and you can see him pouring the water over Carla, but he isn't actually pouring it onto her. He's actually positioned maybe a foot behind her, so the water missed her. And then we're on to, and my dog's been itching in the kitchen once again. There's the dog itching in the kitchen, there's my mother in the kitchen mopping the floor. But if you look at the lyrics that Noel wrote out that night, they're slightly different. He says, and my dog's been itching, scratching in the kitchen. I'll just pop them up here. So they were changed, obviously. But when he wrote that, they hadn't recorded the actual song itself. I always find things like that quite interesting. As I said earlier about the dog would only perform if his mate was with him. If you look on the poster and the labels, you can see there's the second dog is actually there. No, you can't quite get it on the label, but that's it. On the back sleeve, you can see there's another dog. There are two dogs there. The Kevin Costner dog and his mate. So there you have it. There's all the elements of all the lyrics that were illustrated in the song. But one thing that people never notice, and I love little, what they call Easter eggs these days, isn't it? If you look, I'll blow this up and put this on the screen now. If you look in the windows of the railway station now, you will see photographs of bits of Noel's guitars. I mean, this is attention to detail from us on this point. Look at that there. You've got the F-holes, the volume control, there's a machine head, there's a fretboard there, and we'd obviously been down to do test shots of this beforehand, and we'd measured the size of those windows and done cardboard cutouts to place the images on. But I remember the morning of the shoot, me and Matt Sankey sticking all the pictures together for those windows. Why I left it to the morning, I have no idea, because we had other headaches to contend with, i.e. where we were going to get some fish from, living in an area with near no fishmongers. But that was done on the morning of the shoot for some unknown reason. I don't know what that was all about. But yeah, people never normally see that, and there's that. So once the shoot was completed, then it's time to move on to how it will be applied, the image will be applied to the back sleeve, the poster, the labels. So that's the next part of the process. Unlike a lot of other designers or other bands, we never repeated ourselves in terms of just like doing the front image on the back sleeve or just duplicating again on the label. I was always a big believer in value for money for the fans, because I never believed that record sleeves sold records. There's no title on the front of it. There never was on the singles. It just says Oasis. But coming from it as a fan, when I was a kid, I used to buy records, and if I got on all that bus journey back from Manchester and I'd explored all the sleeve, I think it was no good. So I was always of the opinion that, the record sleeves are a bonus for the fans if done properly. So we would do little things like, if you look at the label of the record, it's actually a shot of, I'll do a close-up of that, I don't know if you can, the light's bouncing off it. I'll get my phone on it, there we go. You can see it's the dog having a sniff of the fish in the sink. And there's some outtakes that where both dogs are actually sniffing around the fish. And that image went on to go onto the fly poster, the street fly poster, which I've got a copy of it just here actually. And then this shows how cool creation were, because if you think about it, the record sleeve's not on the poster. How many bands or how many labels would let you get away with that? There's, no, we have to have the sleeve, but on the poster, this is what's advertised in the record. But I would argue, well, nobody knows what the sleeve is anyway, because it's not out yet, so it doesn't make any difference. The idea should be that Oasis, new record out, title, date, and an interesting image, which I think this is. So I'll just get this over here. But if you look at this, here's a tip for you if you're ever looking to get into some of these original 90s Oasis posters. They will never have in the bottom corner creation records or a copyright detail or a web address. Those are all reprints done from merchandising after the event. The original 90s creation record street fly posters were bereft of any branding. I think the idea was so they couldn't get sued for sticking them all up, like nobody'd work out it was them. I know it's ridiculous, but so that's an original. That is as old as that date there. That is from 1995. And I do have a couple of these for sale, actually, which are on the website now. So if you're watching this just as this comes live, you might be able to get one. I'm sure if it's down the track, they've gone, because they are originals from the 90s. So there you have it. The history of how we created the artwork, for some might say. From a meeting in the back of a tour bus with Noel Gallagher, who wrote out the lyrics for me, right through to scouting locations, coming up with a concept, picking the models, making props, shooting it, then applying it to everything else. That's what happened. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, please like it, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, all the rest of it. Because if I get a great response, I'll be doing more videos about all the other sleeves that we did too. So thanks very much for your interest. It means the world. Ta-da.